Hello, everyone. Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Again, we'll mute you for a moment, and then again, mute you all, but with the option that you can unmute yourself so that you have the control in your own hand. So you're muted, but you can choose yourself to unmute yourself when you will talk. It's great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you all.
I would like to invite us to share a moment just by being together here and just be here, maybe also restrain from chatting, just allow to be aware that we are again together. And also be aware that this is always an interesting moment when you go online, because you literally leave one space behind you, at least mostly, and enter a new space. And as you don't do this physically, it's not that you enter a certain building and you go into a certain room and you sit around the table. As we don't do this physically, it's even more important that we do this inwardly, because otherwise you still stay maybe in the private room that you have been before a minute ago and are watching through a glass screen something that's happening in a different room. But it's your own choice to inwardly move from your private room that you just came from to this shared space that we are in. It's an inner position that you have to change. And the reason why I'm bringing this in is first because it helps us to work together. And second, this is something that as a facilitator is very helpful to invite the people you're working with every time, because of the very reason that I just mentioned. Because usually entering a certain space, a certain meeting room, a certain house, sitting down at a table is an initiation moment. Basically, when you sit down around the table and you see each other, you don't do it consciously. It's a cultural habit, but it's an initiation. Okay, here we are at the table or at the circle where we're sitting around, and we are here, not there. But here, this is differently. You are still sitting at the same spot, at the same computer, in the same room, at the same place, in the same location around the world where you have been 5 minutes ago. And you have to make this transition with your consciousness. So it's even more important to be aware that you make these transitions, because if you're not consciously make this transition, maybe you don't. And maybe you stay all these 3 hours that we will be together, basically looking from the outside, being still in your private space and never joining the space that we share here together. So my invitation is just look around, look at the screen, and enjoy the smiles. I enjoy the smiles. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Christina. And just be aware that this is not a virtual meeting. It's a misnomer. This is not a virtual meeting out of a very simple reason. I am not virtual, I'm real. And so are you. You're not virtual, you're real, right here, right together. And we're meeting right now for real, in a different space, I admit. It's not the usual space that we usually are used to meet, but we are real. And to really let it sink in, you are real, I am real, and everyone here is real. And we can appreciate the realness of our togetherness. And the appreciation is important because it makes a difference.
And we're emphasizing this in order to build our muscle of awareness, of presence, in this context, and it's presence in this context, but it's building awareness of presence in one's own life. I mean, it's not just here. And yesterday we started with pair meetings in pairs and connecting in pairs and experiencing the presence that one can feel, sense with another one-on-one in a space like this. And then we also did small groups in order to build your muscle, so that, because the one-on-one is the easiest. It's from infancy, it's what we're oriented to. Infants have an innate fixation for the human face, the eyes and the mouth and the nose. So that's a very deep groove in our consciousness. It's a deep habit to look at another face, to connect with another face. So we upped the ante a little bit and met in small groups in order to expand our capacity for sensing and perceiving to a larger group. And constantly we're making reference to the group as a whole, this wonderful quilt of human beings who inhabit different places on this earth. This amazing fact that we are together and we are sitting in different places on this planet, and that somehow we are here in presence together. And it's that wholeness of the presence that we experience as in our in total here, that begins to open up and make us more aware that there is a dimension of non-separation that usually is outside of our awareness. We're usually too busy with our own thoughts and feelings. It's how we get through life, that we're individuals. We're thinking about our individual situations, our how we're feeling at the moment. We're communicating. We're in relationship. I'm over here. You're there. We're relating to each other. But this field that we're pointing to, this space of the whole that is right here on the screen, is revealing a relatedness that is not simply relationship of one to another or one to two or three people. It is a prior, you could call it, as some do, a prior unity, a prior connection, a dimension of connectedness that is the field of presence that we are inhabiting together. So we're trying to build your muscle to be able to sense into that and to be able to hold that in your awareness.
Basically, that's all what we did yesterday. All what we attempted to do is to together cultivate this muscle out of two reasons. First, because only when we, in any kind of online gathering, cultivate this muscle, we create a solid online space between each other. As we mentioned yesterday, we are not held by a physical space. We are not held by a certain power of a table, of a room, of a building, of a particular site in the countryside that holds us. So because this is the case, the only thing that holds us is our consciousness, our intention. And this makes us much more dependent on each other to hold this together, because if we don't hold it, if everyone right now would be just reading their email, the space would fall apart, and you would feel it. So you would feel it that we are not together in this. But if everyone is paying attention to this, we feel it too. This is for the whole group, and even more so for the facilitator, because the facilitator is the one who is ongoingly inviting to this space, because they are the people who bring other people who are not as much experienced to coming together in this quite new way that we have not trained as a human culture to be together in. It's new territory. We haven't done this 10 years ago. Nobody has done this 10 years ago. It's a new cultural thing that we have to learn together. And what we did yesterday to bring you together, first in the group of two, you can call it a technique. Basically, it's a bridge, because what it does when you're one-on-one with each other, one other, it pulls you out of yourself. It's much more difficult to basically stay out of it and stay in your private room. And just with one another, I mean, you can still kind of, but it's much more difficult to stay with yourself. You're pulled to relationship. And that's why we do this, so to pull each other out. But it's not a group yet. It's just a one-on-one encounter. And it's, as you probably experience right now, it's easier one-on-one. It's a little more difficult with 4. It's more difficult with 20, and it's more difficult with 80. But exactly to cultivate the skills and to see how we can do this and hold it, that's the foundation. And yesterday we were kind of trying to create the foundations, to cultivate the muscles. And today we want to talk more about how to work with this muscle to cultivate the space between us.
And how to work with the space between us itself. So we're moving quite fast, but there's to develop mastery in each of the steps that we're taking takes time and attention and willingness. But I think that you'll get something powerful that you can use from it nevertheless. So what we're trying to do is create. We're creating a field of coherence in pointing to what we're pointing to, in pointing to this space together, and the fact that we are connected in something already creates coherence. And creating coherence is a necessary step to be able to work together co-creatively in a much deeper way. Because it's out of that coherence comes diversity. And out of that diversity, again, comes a different kind of connectivity and connection. And so what we're doing is we're looking to create a field of coherence from which something new can come out of the kind of the center of our conversation, out of the intersubjective, interbeing space that we share. And there are many ways to create coherence. This is how we do it. We call you to meet in a shared awareness that we are present together in something before that is before our differences. There is something here. Before I am I and you are you, there's something here. There's something that is holding us together, and it is being, it is presence. And there are different ways depending on the context that you may be in. You can have a moment of silence to start to bring up this field of connection. We're all connected in silence. You can meditate together if that's appropriate for your context for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You can do toning. Do you know what toning is? Sharing tones and toning together. You can sing together. We did that once recently. We sang, everyone had their mics off and everyone sang a song, and then we brought all the mics on, and out of this chaos came coherence. It was amazing. So it's all designed to create a unity in the field, a sense of shared connection that is actually a deeper reality than the one that we usually live in. So that's what we're up to. And today we're going to go into the working with this space and how one works with this space as a facilitator. But before we move on, we thought it would be nice to be able to integrate a bit together.
And for that, we would like to invite you to get together in small groups again, something like 10 minutes, short time, groups of 5. And there are also some people who have not been here yesterday. That's maybe also a good setting to kind of share a little bit about your experience, your impressions, also your questions from yesterday. So next 5 minutes, we will put you again into groups of 5. We do it in the same way like we did yesterday. We create breakout groups. You will see a pop-up window where you can be asked to join the breakout room. And as soon as you say yes to join, you automatically will be transferred. And we ask you to share about your experience from yesterday, your insights from yesterday, your question of yesterday. And if there are some people who are new to it, you can also share a little bit what happened yesterday, what they missed. And then we would like to come together in this big room, in this big space again, and go further in the conversation about this, but in this big circle that we're in right now. That's our suggestion how to start with. Is it okay with you to go about this way?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then we will create the rooms. And we will open the room and you just can enter and we will see each other in 10 minutes. So thank you.
Okay.
Good. It seems we're all back. And yeah, we just would love to hear from you. So some insights, some questions that you shared in the group. You can raise your hand and we can talk about this in this bigger circle.
And great. Raising your hand is also a function. I think most of you have figured out where it is. It's next to the participants. If you click there, you'll find yourself. You can raise your hand that way or in the options below.
Derwin, you raised your hand.
Hello. Thank you for the course and everything that we're sharing together. And my question, and my voice is echoing back to myself, so but I'll just work through that. I'm curious about how you invite coherence without that becoming groupthink. So, you know, the difference between coherence and maybe groupthink or authoritarianism, those kinds of things, right? There's a difference between the we space and that. So I'm just curious about what you've learned about that, those distinctions in your work and your practice.
In fact, it's a very good question. It's a very good question because there is always the possibility of groupthink. There is also always the possibility to hold a context in a kind of authoritarian context. Then it's easy to create coherence if you just make it in an authoritarian way. What we try to do is we make a distinction in we spaces. This goes a little more in a theoretical territory, but just to explain our thinking behind it. We make a distinction between pre-individuated and trans-individuated we spaces. And the difference between pre-individuated and trans-individuated both holds a we space, but one transcends and includes the capacity of individuation. And the big difference is that a trans-individual we space, when it really works, and it's an art, it's not a given, is that it works via invitation and free choice to participate. So there's an ongoing free choice to hold this together, not because someone says so, not because I give up my individuation, I'm just following the herd or something like that, but out of my conscious will and intention to hold something beyond myself with the full responsibility of my individual capacity for responsibility and choice, which creates a very fragile situation because we are completely interdependent on that. And ideally, nobody dominates that, but it's a self-organizing form that's held by our free intention to do this together. And of course, there are some people who are more skilled in that and can work as an advisor and holder. But ideally, this is a self-organized organism that is held by our shared intention to also find out, so what is this space about and where does this space want to go? And this is at least the ideal that we're talking about. But as you're talking this question, I have to go there because admittedly, this is easier to talk about than to achieve.
Mm-hmm. I'd also say that part of what we do is try to make it very experiential and inquiry based. That we're asking you here, we're inviting you to explore something with your awareness, not with your mind. In a certain sense, your mind is the mechanism by which we understand and make sense out of what's happening, but that this is a forum for inquiry, and as a forum for inquiry, everything can be questioned, but it's about everything being questioned from a shared interest in the movement in the intersubjective. So it's not that we align with what Darwin says or what Thomas says. We are looking to figure out what enables the intersubjective, the place between us, to come alive. And that becomes that's then an objective question, objective subjective question. It's like, oh, so and so said something and it shifted the context of the space. What does that mean? That our guide in this is the feedback that one gets from the collective presence. And that's the foundation from which we're working, that we feel has I think it takes something that realizing that in working in this way, there are places that end up fragmenting and going back to separation, and there are places that end up becoming very fruitful and co-creative. And if our intention is to be co-creative, that's the groove we want to be in. So in that inquiry and in that common commitment, there's something that is not individual based, or that's not based in an authoritarian position.
Yeah. And just to add a little more to that, that's part of the reason why we emphasize so much what we emphasized yesterday, this muscle and sensitivity to be aware of the quality of the wholeness of a certain we space. Because to the degree that there is a sensing capacity what wants to emerge between us, which is different than what I want to happen here, and different what someone else wants to happen here, it's more related what wants to happen here in the whole between us. It's an intuitive quality that one can lean into. This togetherness can be the leading factor between us. So nobody really is leading in that sense. We're together finding out what wants to emerge in a dialogical form. And that is something that admittedly needs a lot of skill and it takes time to go there, but it is something that is something very fruitful, because there's a creative potential opening up this way that is very powerful.
Yeah, I would say, just to restate that, the dialogical nature of the space is in the dialogue nature of the space. The commitment to the intersubjective awakening are two powerful ways that keep, I think, that keep things from falling into the traps that you mentioned.
Just to explain again, it's an awareness. For example, when I talk, there's something I want to bring in right now, or maybe what I think what Derwin wants to hear right now, or which way ever. And this is all okay. But is there also an awareness of what is the right thing for the whole in this moment? And can I, if I'm aware that something I want to bring in, but I find this is maybe not what is really of service of the space between us, can I make this distinction and hold back my own intention and be more in service of what and it can be wrong, but it also can be right, intuit that is maybe the potential that's growing between us. To the degree that when one can do that, one can be there for something that is of service of this emerging we space.
Mm.
Okay.
Thank you.
I thank you. Thank you for your question. I'd like to go to Bruce, because you had your hand up at the end last night, and I saw that you had your hand up today. Bruce Silva?
I did have my hand up, but I decided it was more about me than the group, so I unmuted. So I took my hand down because it was more about me saying something about me. So it wasn't good for the group, which you had just said before. So.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, and thank you for that care. I really appreciate the care for the space.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah. Okay, Nicole.
I wanted to share one thing that came out of our little group just now, and is also very related to what you were just talking about, which is the intention we discovered in the exercise with the leaning yesterday. So it's not so much maybe about leaning back or leaning forward, but if my intention is to be, or our intention is to be with the whole of this little group, then also in the leaning back, we can connect with the group and also care for the group as much as with the leaning forward.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this was something in our conversation that was a relief for me from yesterday, because I had a big question mark with that. Since sometimes I felt like when I lean back, I actually give more space to the we than when I lean in.
Mm-hmm.
So I was curious how this is for other people. And we were exploring how much intention has to do with that. Is my intention with the we or with the me? And how do I physically express that or feel it or sense the space?
In some ways, we noticed this leaning in phenomenon would happen just naturally. That people, when they became very engaged within the dialogue and exploring this space together, would be so far in. And that's part of how we began to play with it. But of course, the thing that's most important is what you're pointing to, Nicole, is what is our intention. And intention is a deep thing. Intention is not simply, I've decided, I'm going to the course today. The intention is a deeper intention. And that deeper that deeper movement is it is drawn forward by this space. That there's a longing, a movement in the self that is a desire for connection, creation. Let's do something. There's an excitement, and that level of intentionality coming in with being that open for that movement to start to reveal itself within oneself is really what we're pointing to. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Sam?
Okay. Okay, I think you can hear me now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate the time that we're spending, about how much I'm learning just about connecting with Zoom, about, say, sensing the environment, and about this idea of attention and intention.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have only 4 out of 5 senses, or maybe there's a 6th sense, so we could debate and whatever. But I have to train myself to pay particular attention to people. And whether it's, imagining you guys doing these spaces from a long time ago over the phone, or it's imagining allowing for my attention to go where it needs to go in my body to have a great rapport with the other person, and to realize where our shared intention is. And so it's just amazing to me how where if I can feel into our shared intention to, say, maintain the space, or to look at whether I'm coming from a me-centered place or a place which is more beneficial for the space, how when we're tracking the intention and able to get feedback on that level, that our attention is seemingly naturally opened up to allow for us to pay attention to that which is most resourceful, or to that which our best instincts would bring forward. And I don't know if you have anything to say about that phenomena, but it's like, for me, who's feeling like a real beginner here, the space feels like it's lovingly and sort of tenderly guiding me through the vulnerabilities of, say, I don't know how to use Zoom, and I stumble over myself or whatever, but it feels like a real safe space, but also where there's a lot of dynamism and a lot of potential. I don't want to go on and talk about it too much, but it's an amazing experience for me.
That's awesome. That's really awesome, Sam. That's actually perfect what you just said, because it is true that where our intention goes, that's where our attention goes, and that's a very powerful. It can point out to us when our attention is elsewhere. That it's like, wow, what's really my intention here in this context, but the space itself has a quality, and it has a quality that resonates in our bodies, in our being, and people feel it as care, people feel it as love, people feel it as a longing, but it is a guide. And it's part of the surprising nature of the deeper dimension of what we're working with.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I've always thought of facilitation in terms of a big mind, whatever we think about that, but it's like, it seems it allows for us human beings to live out our full potential. And if we were to come together as a team, for us to be much more fluid in, say, resource sharing or proper management of ourselves. And it's just amazing. Not so much, oh, I'm going to facilitate meditation. I'm really discovering so much more here. So thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Sam.
Okay, Nancy Ann, I saw you before. Where are you?
Yeah, as this conversation continues, there's such multidimensionality. And something I've been observing, and it's getting stronger, is that we spend so much time in the visual sense that it takes us in a certain direction of seeing and looking and exploring.
Mm.
But the truth is, all of our senses are operating.
That's right.
And they are many.
Mm.
For some of us, we may not have even experienced some of them because we've been dominated by one.
Mm.
And it's an awesome thing, because what I'm sensing into is that the we space that we all came here to explore with intention, a big component of that is coming together to meet the invisible, and the nuanced senses, I'll call them, the less used ones, the felt sense ones, are always there, but in the background. But when we get silent and still in a group, it automatically comes to the surface because it has a sense of belonging in that space.
That's right.
And then there isn't a necessity for so many words or to have to put frames on things, because the senses are dynamic, just like life and seasons and cycles, and come and go, and they're trying to meet the moment. And it's really difficult in a fast-paced world. So entering into this online space and creating a world where this is welcome and invited, it's like inviting those senses out to play, to create a new way of coming together.
I think that's true. I think that's very true, because it is calling forth deeper sensing from us.
Yes.
And that deeper sensing is very powerful. But for many of us, these senses, to be able to sense into nature, be able to sense into the life force, to be able to sense into the deeper movement in a conversation, these things many of us have lost over well, in our lifetimes, but also over hundreds of years of a certain way of being. And so it's quite. I appreciate what you're
It's
bringing.
like a lost art.
Mm-hmm.
It's being recovered, because that is the place from which we receive that sensitivity that allows this subjective, objective, inner connectivity to have a life in real time. Or a real life in time, whichever way you want to look at it.
Isn't it amazing that this is happening on Zoom on your computer? I mean, that blows me away. that it's possible this way, and it becomes to the front, is pulled to the front in this way.
And it's a paradox, because if it's real, it should be able to happen anywhere. But it's a really deep remembering, I think.
And this is the proof of it, that it is even possible in this technological environment that we're in right now. That's quite a proof. So thank you, Nancy.
Okay. So Susan Maples.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. By the way, I'm standing because my hip really hurts when I sit for a long time. So if I look a little different, that's what that's about.
Makes sense.
I'm new to this experience, and it sounds to me like, as you speak, that this for me is not any different. The essence of it is not any different than when I walk in physically to a room for a training or a facilitation or an experience with other people. And I'm wondering if I'm missing something here, that this is so very, very different. It doesn't feel very different to me, other than that I'm in my home and I'm able to actually see sort of face on everyone if I scroll through all the little boxes, as compared to sitting in a room, for example, where I would see the backs of people's heads, etc. So I'm wondering if I'm missing something, and I'm feeling like with senses that perhaps, and this is something I mentioned yesterday in my small group, which was quite exciting and wonderful. I thought that professionally, I was a counselor, and I did both in-person meetings with people and over the phone. And when I was when I got the job over the phone, I thought this is going to be sort of second best. And what it turned out to be is I felt my best analogy was that I was like a blind counselor, listening very carefully for pauses, for pronunciation, for questions that weren't asked, etc. And so this experience for me feels quite similar to that in a way, even though I'm actually being able to see the people. I think enough said. I'd like to hear your reactions to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I remember when you spoke yesterday, Susan, there was something very electric that you were expressing.
Perhaps. I'm not sure to what you're referencing, but I know when Deanna and Cullen and I looked at each other for that what's seeming to be endless period of time and not speaking, you know, I felt like I had this whole image of who they were and what they did and etc. Maybe that was the electric that you heard.
Yeah, there was something in your voice and in a certain kind of excitement, a certain kind of recognition of meeting. And it didn't seem to be something that was just simply in your mind. It seemed to be very much a meeting.
Yes, very much.
And that's what we're trying to build, is the capacity to have that kind of recognition with the whole that's here now.
Which you seem to have. The way I interpret it, you say am I missing something here? It's not different than meeting in other circumstances. Seems that you have the capacity in this unusual circumstance, at least most people would say so, to be aware of the meeting space. And maybe it's because also you used to work or are working as a counselor on the telephone, that you develop the capacity not everyone has. Because
maybe
one of the things we want to achieve here, I mean, we explain from our experience and try to describe what we think helps. But to be honest, a big part of what we try to do is just to make us acquainted with the space, so that we can familiarize us with this and say, this is also human space. And that we lose kind of the shyness of, this is technology and I don't know what to do. And but relax and use your senses, use your body, use your cells, use your imagination, you use your presence, and see meeting, presence, sharing, and experiencing each other is possible. And as soon as this opens up, we have a lot of resources that we have anyway. When we go beyond this kind of lockdown hypnosis, this is a computer, I don't know what to do with the computer, and I don't know what this little square. I really, as soon as we kind of let go of that and say, yes, it's all there, but we are here, then we can relax, and the skills that we have, human skills, of presence, of sharing, can open up, and we can learn to use this in this different environment. A big part is, we just invite you to share this space in a conscious way, so that you are aware, you have the skills already, and you can bring them into this new environment, and we can learn how to use the skills that we have in this different environment.
And as you said that you learned on the phone something that you didn't really know before, but it was very close. It was very, in some ways, very easy. That you learned something about presence, about voice, about how much a voice can carry in terms of meaning and layers of meaning or multidimensionality. Yes. Here also we are blocked by the technology, which then calls forward different capacities of sensing and awareness that then start to fill this space with life again in a but in a it's not in a different way, I would say. Like the difference between being face to face and being on the phone, there's a difference. But there's a depth that is able to you can bring to a phone conversation, and also that you can bring to this space that comes from the fact that we are stopped from engaging in our usual way. But when that life comes, when the life comes through, it's like, this is possible here too.
In fact,
yes, yeah. I think it can be very intimate, and
yes,
I felt that yesterday in particular, and somewhat today. We didn't have as much chance for each one of us to explore our thoughts in this session today, but it's thank you for that explanation. It's helpful, because I really felt like I was missing something, and I guess I'm not. I just feel very comfortable in the space. So thank you.
And you will have more chances in smaller groups later on.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Wendy?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Hello, Wendy.
Hi. Yeah, so I'll be brief. One is that yesterday and also today, I'm feeling the need for a little bit of movement. Like actually yesterday, I had to take myself off camera and kind of shake about a bit and move, and wondering whether you incorporate that sometimes in just a minute shakeout for everybody or something like that. I would find that helpful. That's about me, but maybe it'll help the we, I don't know. A quick request. You mentioned about using song for coherence, and if there was time and it worked either today or the next 2 days, I'd love to experiment with that.
Great.
If that was possible. And lastly, how do you manage the tension when there's a lot of people wanting to contribute? Like I nearly put my hand down, knowing that also there's probably other, small groups in your schedule to get on with and that kind of thing. I personally, in the small times when I facilitate, find that a difficult tension between the number of people that want to contribute and then getting on with a kind of loose schedule.
I mean, that's always a tension for any facilitator. But I think also what's interesting is, and I think people have started to mention this actually in our the other session of the program that we're offering, the one that meets before this, that there's also a collective intelligence that's working. Like the question that you raised is probably something that other people feel, that you hear somebody say something that you're also curious about, that there's a that there's a coherence that starts forming in the group, and that you can count on the fact that people will hear questions that they have answered in different ways, and then hold that as as best one can.
Thank you.
And in terms of movement and music, there's just different things that you can use. They're just not appropriate in every kind of context. So we focus very much on language, and to see how connecting through consciousness and language allows an amazing opening of embodied presence between us. And sometimes it's a right, particularly if you're body-oriented or therapy-oriented or counseling-oriented context, to do movements or singing is a very cool thing to do. If you do more, let's say, work-oriented context, it's maybe less appropriate to do so, and it depends on the environment. Why we very much focus on language? Because this works everywhere. And there's something also very powerful that to be aware how language moves. It's not just the body movement moves, also language moves. And because the nature of this medium, internet, where we usually are not standing but sitting in front of the computer, and more often we won't do yoga together or won't do body exercise together, the skill to learn how we create coherent movement in a conversation is something that allows to carry the whole space. Mm-hmm. That's why we focus on that, because it's an overall skill that really holds in all these contexts.
Mm. Thank you so much. That's great.
Yeah, also just really to say that depending on it, so much of what exercises one chooses or what one focuses on. I mean, the reason why we take long breaks is so that people can move, people can breathe, people can be feel the sun on their skin, the rain on their skin, whatever they want. But the groups that you're running, the things that you're facilitating, will have their own language also, their own language and their own movement, their own rhythm, and it depends on what what norms you want to create. If movement is important in your group, movement is something that makes sense to do. If singing is something that would be an enlivening to your particular context, that's an important important to bring in. But I also wanted to go back. I mean, Thomas, when you said that language is used across most of these contexts, even in meditation, one does meditation instruction. You don't usually just go bang into a Zoom room or into a room in a meditation center and just sit down and nobody says anything. The voice and language carry an enormous amount, and part of what we're doing and part of what we're offering and is how do we use language as an invocation? How do we create an invitation and an invocation through language to open up this space of presence between us? How do we do that? We have to do that with language. And that's the role of the facilitator in particular is the person who opens the space. And the space is not outside here, it is within and between. And as much as that lives within the facilitator and is expressed and given in language, that will be the key that starts to open this space for others.
Well, thank you so much. That's really insightful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's also just helpful to pause for a moment. And there's something also happening in these moments of pause. We had a very powerful conversation in the earlier group today about the musical quality of language or the musical intelligence of language. That on the one hand we communicate by the meanings of the words, but there's also the sounds of the words. There's the intonation, there's the pitch, there's the rhythm, there's the back and forth. And like a good piece of music, because I'm Austrian, I very much appreciate string quartets of Beethoven. And I see string quartets of Beethoven as a beautiful teaching tool of dialogue. When you listen to these the five instruments, how they are talking to each other and holding a dialogical space. And of course, a good jazz does the same thing or even better, because jazz, it's birthed out of the moment. It's not written down on paper like a classical quartet is. But there's something that is a certain element of dialogical capacities that usually is underestimated or not even reflected, that talking, dialogue, is also a form of music. And to be aware, I think I mentioned yesterday that there's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end, and you have to respect the energy of the beginning, the energy of the middle, and the energy of the end, and it's different. And you have to be aware that, and sometimes the dialogue is too fast to leave space. Sometimes things are slowing down, but in a way where you feel it's getting a little too slow here. It needs energy, and energy is asked for. Or something, sometimes there's tension, it's a good tension, but it needs the tension needs a kind of a solution. It's aiming for something. It's a creative tension that wants to go somewhere. It's looking for something. This is beyond just the meaning part of language. It has also an energetic, musical logic to it. So part of how to mold a dialogical space is to have a sense of this musical reality of dialogue, and to bring each other together in a dialogical way. Because if you just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, you basically you kill something. You have to invite. You have to risk an opening where something came in and you don't know, will it build up or will it pull down? You have to risk. If you don't risk, you won't win. So all this is part of what allows a dialogical space, any dialogical space, to develop. But because online is so much dependent on it, because we don't have anything else. This is here even more the case than in physical encounters. But on the other hand, that's always something I find so fascinating, because it's so much more needed here. So the skill is much more asked for. It's like any skill that's asked for and you train it, you exercise it, you also have it in other circumstances. It enhances also our capacity in any kind of environment. Because here you can't go with your usual habits how to do a dialogue. You have to be more aware, otherwise an online space just falls apart. And I think all of you, at least we know many Zoom calls, they just fall apart or never come together. And part of why Zoom is so kind of, is Zoom fatigue, people start to talk about. It will be one of the new words of 2020, Zoom fatigue. The reason is because there is no energetic coherence. There is no coming together in this place. And part of it to try to share a different experience is possible. And it's dependent on our capacity to come together to create an energetic and meaningful coherence of dialogue that we can cultivate together.
Mm. Actually, you're one of the kind of the arc that we're building here, in starting with coherence and creating coherence. And now what Thomas is bringing in is the multiplicity, the multiple perspectives, the multiple voices, the multiple instruments that are here together, and how can this turn into or become orchestrated, become musical, become resonant, have its own melody? How can we work? Because that's the beauty of music, is that there is a whole that the different instruments, the different voices create. And that's what we're in this space that is only held by our awareness, holding that whole and wanting to play our instruments together and to harmonize, be dissonant, but to be holding the multiple voices and instruments within a whole context is what enables a creative emergence, a creative momentum to come out of the coherence and through the multiplicity of perspectives and voices that we have.
And there's one other dimension of language I would like to emphasize, and I would like to call it the magic dimension of language. And with the magic dimension of language, you don't have to go too esoteric with that. It's something very simple. It's the power, Elizabeth talked about it, of naming, of evocation. Every time we name something, we call it into the space of the dialogue. It's just this. I mean, if you think about it, what an unbelievable magical tool it is. I just say the word tree, and in the whole dialogical sphere that we are right now, in all our minds, somehow a tree appears. That's kind of if you think about it, that's quite some power.
It's power.
It's power. I just say this little word tree, and in all our consciousness, a tree appears. If something is magic, I think you can call this magic. But also, if you say COVID-19, something appears. And to be aware that language, and I think we quite often don't think about this deep enough, it's not just what we're talking about. It's also language is a form of action. It's a creation. It's an invocation. So with any single word in a sentence that we put in a dialogical space, we create this space. The space becomes filled with trees, with meaning, with mountains, with people, with love, with care, with conflict, with tiredness, with aliveness. Every single word is setting something and creates its own life. And part of the intelligence, how to weave a dialogue, is how to weave this in a meaningful, collective way together. And part of the capacity of the facilitator is to allow this not in a way that just you are talking, as I do right now, but to allow this to be a woven process that is woven by all of us in a coherent way.
Mm. And silence can be part of that too. But it's also, the thing is that what we're using language and awareness and consciousness and the invocation and evocational power of words to create this shared experience. And that's part of what we want to, I think, maybe hold that and maybe go on break right now. I know, Deanna, you still have your hand raised. Maybe we can pick that up in another way through. But the holding all of this, we want to come back, and when we come back to go into small groups and talk and speak about about this together in how do we work this together? How do we work this space together? And so we'll take a 30-minute break, and come back at a quarter to the hour, or in some places it may be a quarter after the hour. But that's 30 minutes from now. And yeah, let's, again, like we said yesterday, use this time not to jump into a different type of screen if you can help it. And get a breath of fresh air, sense the deeper dimensions of the natural world that's around you. Find your dog. Do something that allows you to stay with and deepen and expand with this deeper sensing in.
So, see you in 30 minutes. Thank you. And you can stay online. Just switch off camera and mic if you want, and we come back in 30 minutes. Welcome back.
Hello.
Hope you enjoyed your break. Hope you enjoyed your off-screen time.
Hope you had off-screen time. Okay. So we're starting to speak more about language, the power of language, the magic of language, the use of language to evoke the space, and the constant reference and reminder of the collective space that we're in. That this has been part of the themes that we've been working into our dialogues with you, and in this space this afternoon, evening, morning, whenever time it is for you. And what we would like to do is to break into small groups and talk about another aspect of creating space, and that is incredibly important to creating a rich resonant space, and that is listening. That on the other side of speaking is listening. And so we thought what we would like to do is to have you go into your groups and engage and speak to each other about what is real listening.
And really to appreciate that listening is the other side of language. Because listening and language are two sides of the same in a dialogue. Language builds on something to build on. But if nothing is landing in you, there's nothing to build on than your own inner monologue. So to allow to be aware of the other and the space as a whole is the big part, the capacity of listening. And part of it is a cognitive, to understand, but part is just to be exposed to what language creates. You don't necessarily have to understand what a word like a thunder means, but when you hear thunder, something is evoked, and you can respond by the imprint of the flow of the conversation. And the capacity to hold the dialogical process through our shared capacity of listening to each other, and this is important, listening to the whole of the conversation. It's a double listening. It's a double listening to the other and others in singular, and the whole of it as it is a whole that's more than the parts.
Mm.
If you only listen to the parts and miss the whole, you miss the whole.
Actually, this is a very important part about working with this space, that it requires, and this is a stretch for all of us, it requires us to hold in our being, in our own awareness, the wholeness of the situation. And that means different people coming from different cultures, the space between us that is not just local, but is much bigger than that. To be able to hold this space between us as a real conversation is happening, as ideas are shared, as experience is shared, as something is investigated and opened up, to be able to not just be in the dialogue, the back and forth, but be able to have some space around it. This is a space, this enables us to be touched by what is being said, because it pulls us a little bit outside of our immediate identification with our point of view. And it's these small spaces that open up the potential for change, for transformation, for something new to happen. And it's in that in that holding open and being in conversation and allowing oneself to be touched, that's the space of listening that we're pointing to. So if you could explore this double dimension of being in a conversation and holding something, holding this space open, that would be, and explore, what is that like? What is that like with each other? What happens? How do you hear each other? Where do you resonate?
And if this is a help for you, this holding the space open could be also understood, and if you take this literally or not literally, is up to you, that the space is talking to you. And our capacity to listen to each other, but to listen to the whole of the space as she, it, he, whatever is talking as a whole. You don't have to take it literally. You can take it literally as you like, but it helps to expand this awareness to the space that we are in and allow the space itself to be part of the conversation, part of your listening.
Yeah, that, just to say, that doesn't mean I hear her voice. I hear her voice. I have heard the speaking of the space speaking to me. That doesn't mean that. It means developing a sensitivity and intuition for, like what we were saying before, the rhythm, the tension, the movement, the sense of possibility, the sense of potentiality,
right,
and moving into that. And that's something that does live between us.
So we'll open the rooms. Again, you access them by agreeing to go to the breakout room. We will take for this, I think, 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. So we'll be back at quarter after or quarter to the hour, depending on where you are.
Yeah. And you have 20 minutes for your conversation.
Pardon?
Give us a signal halfway through so we know more or less where we are.
We can give you, we'll give you 5 minutes.
Give you 5 minutes, and then you have 5 minutes and then 1 minute. You always get a 1 minute before signal, but we also can give you 5 minutes so you have a little more time to prepare for ending.
Great.
But that'll work for you?
Yeah, because sometimes sometimes in the small groups, you want to give each other space, and then one person hasn't shared or is just 1 minute, which doesn't really honor everybody.
Yeah. It's really good also to collectively together take responsibility for each other and to be aware of the 20 minutes that you have, and just if you're the person to take care, maybe not to take too much space, and just be careful with each other and allow each other to be in there and be giving and not taking in the way.
No, I know, but halfway through would be a good indication. So then at least.
Okay. Halfway through, we can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And one more question, maybe I missed it, but is there anything in particular we speak about?
Yes, listening. What does
We
it
speak
mean?
about listening.
What does it mean to really listen?
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Welcome back again. Okay, so why don't we start with just sharing or sharing or continuing the conversation right here?
Again, you can raise your hand and we can, here.
Do you raise your hand physically or there is a point in the screen?
You can do either.
But it's easier if you do it when you go to the participants. You have several icons and one is called raise hands.
You see it?
I don't have it. I have reactions, record, share screen, chat.
There's one that's on the left side that should be.
No. She's talking about down here.
Yeah.
Do you have one that says participants?
I went to participants. Okay. Oh, there's a hand here.
Exactly. Now I see your hand.
Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. That was my question.
Okay, great.
Oh, good. So Rick was the first one who wanted to speak.
Yeah. So it was very interesting and beautiful and lovely. And we just noticing the sort of the change of initially speaking about things we knew. And then we were just slowing down. And right at the end, Brendan said something that really just exploded with a big yes. Said, the intimacy of the shared space of not knowing and coming from there. And it was just this big yes. And it was in that kind of intimate recognition of all seeing that together without words. and there's something deeper there, very mysterious. It was a shared recognition of our one presence, seeing something together. And then continuing to just not know and share what is emerging in a very slow, open way. And it was so inviting when you hear and feel somebody sharing that way. Yeah, it was just a very beautiful, remarkable kind of discovery.
We mentioned this yesterday, but not today. So I'm glad that you brought this up, Rick. That this place this approach of not knowing, of not already knowing what it means to listen, not already knowing what someone is going to say, and the roots of that at this moment into a crisis that we're in, where we don't know what's going to happen. That there's a way that our not knowing kind of echoes in a deeper way, in a more existential way for us now, that opens up something deeply human between us, deeply a real, something deeply touching. Our aliveness, our presence. And I mean, really listening does mean coming from some place that one doesn't know already, or being interested in what one doesn't know already.
And it feels such an amazing, wonderful gift.
Mm.
Not only to to share, to live from, and to offer that kind of vulnerability and presence, because it invites, like you said, an opening to another point of view, another seeing emerges. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks to all in the group too.
Eunice? Eunice.
You hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh yes, a beautiful experience. And I want to thank you both for, inviting the space and speaking so precisely about language. Because I can feel much more comfortable with feeling into the space or holding the space, and I find it challenging to time or to speak because I can feel the regulation functions and fear. But you created such a beautiful opening that when we went into the group, I was willing to ask my questions or to say the little I feel I know on listening, and to ask about group work, which I haven't done from a facilitator standpoint. And just step by step in so few minutes, I feel like it was the first time for me that I really had so many components open up that I wasn't like too zoomed in or too spacious. Like I could feel the large space. I could hear the person. I could feel myself, and I often feel like I'm slower. And it was a question for you in a sense, because when I'm holding a space, I tend to want to be there and feel like maybe it's part of the learning process to stay slow. But I often feel like others, even in a triad, they're speaking and they're going faster, and I kind of can't stay with it all. But it was so beautiful for me with my partners for all of it to come together, and we were all sort of in that coherent same speed, and like Rick said, in the sort of in the unknowing of letting emergence come with our questions or our space. And it was beautiful. I'm so grateful to you both.
Thank you, Eunice. Thank you very much. One thing in I think this is the language we have to work with here, that often when we talk about holding space, we exclude ourselves from that. We're not in the space, or it's like I'm holding the space out here. And to really realize that the space is something in many ways that holds us, and that we're in there too, and so that there's not this division between I'm holding the space or I'm in the conversation, and that's an integration that we really need to work for.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
And by the way, holding space means also holding the tension, and the tension can be a tension between, but can be also tension in me. And part is to allow the tension to just do his thing or its thing, which usually tension can also show an opening, and sometimes it doesn't show it right away, and it needs kind of this curiosity of what's this tension leading to in oneself or in between, but this curiosity that allows us the tension not to close down or not to put it away or not to put it on the other, but to hold it as something living between us and engage with it. And that quite often, or more often than we think, leads to some creative opening that can be part of the creative power of a conversation.
Mm.
So thank you.
Thank you both. Beautiful.
Sophia. Sophia.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Hey.
Hello. Hola.
Hola.
Okay. Thank you. I really resonate with what you said, because in the group that I was in, the listening, it was coming in, it was cooking to the extent where I felt like I was almost having a hot flush. I rolled my sleeves because it felt like the space that was opening up in my listening and appreciation of the people I was in the room with, and how, so when listening as I was speaking to how the room was in itself, I spoke into this beautiful space that I was listening to at the same time as being heard and seen and felt and experienced in another way, very deeply. And the other thing that I didn't say, but I would like, you may know it, but when a babe, in the fetus, in the human being, when the ear is first formed, the first 3 weeks, in the first 3 weeks where the fetus is growing, one of the first things that is formed after the initial structure of the spine is the middle ear, the middle part of the middle ear. And it's empty space, it's a vacuum.
Wow.
Like nature knew that what we really need for the listening, almost like the core of what listening is on a physiological level, is this empty space.
Beautiful. Wow.
And then things, all the intricacies of the ear grew off that.
Amazing. It's like this, a little bit of infinite emptiness in there. Wow. Silence. Wow.
And maybe in there is the universe, because that's what it feels like when you really listen, isn't it? That you're really listening from an empty universe. There's
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Diana.
Yesterday morning, when we started, you had pointed out to us how we could hide the self image. And I had not ever done that. I didn't know that you could do that. And it came into me, just came to me early. I'm going to give that a try. And then others on the call or on this particular group tried it also. And it was really quite interesting. I can understand why that is really kind of metaphorically so interesting, because I didn't realize how much I checked in on myself when I was up in the screen in a small group. And to experience it with my image gone was just such an aha that it was just so beautiful, because that individual me visually disappeared. And it enhanced the my experience of the group a great deal. So I just wanted to share that is really a fantastic small thing to do.
Yeah. And it's a great metaphor, isn't it?
Yes, it's an incredible metaphor. It was biologically felt, when I was gone. And, it was very experiential and very, very good. So I thank you for that.
Sure.
All of these years, I didn't know that was there.
Yeah. It may be, I don't think it was there when it first started, but at some point, if someone figured that out, that would be helpful.
So I wanted to share if people wanted to do that. It was very, very good.
To remember that. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ursula.
Yeah, hello.
Yes.
I hear the Austrian accent, so I fall into my German. I wanted. You see, this is resonance. Yeah. I wanted to report a little bit from our group because it was very nice exploration and discoveries. One was about having a safe space as a prerequisite for deeper listening. Deeper listening makes deeper sharing possible, but in order for this deeper sharing, you need to have the safe space before. So that two of us were very strong on that. And there was also an observation that when people go on Zoom, somehow there is already more commitment for this trust space. Yeah. And then there wasn't enough time and we didn't need to analyze, is it now because of this special time? At the same time, my experience is you can do this with Zoom if you create this safe space or safe enough space. Yeah. And the other thing was about sensing. One of us in the group felt really strong. It's about sensing the safe space and the space in between. And we also had the 4 levels of listening of Otto Scharmer. Some of us have experience there, that when we introduce that people immediately become more ready to go into deep listening. We need to find the right language for that we can invite someone. It's not about giving a lecture, it's about enabling the listening. And that also was a nice experience. And about experimenting. One of us had technical problems and then lost the pictures. So we suggested, instead of just staying with trying to fix it, why don't we just listen more deeply? So that was the charming little element of it. It was maybe more challenging for the person not having the pictures, but somehow we suggested that, and that helped us along to be more connected. Thank you.
I'd love to comment briefly about safe space. And I think safe space is unsafe when it's fragmented, when there's separation, when there's division. And I think part of what is powerful about this space that we're working in is the resonance with and intuition of and felt sense of wholeness. And when that wholeness is present, when it begins to open up in one's experience, that there is that there is this, it's not simply a container, that there is a dimension of reality, of non-separation that we are connecting in, that in that there is safety. So it's not it automatically it triggers our deeper trust, because it is not separate and not divided. And that, I think, is a power. It enables work to be done and an engagement to happen at a very deep level.
And as you probably recognized, a lot of what we're talking about and what we try to share is the capacity to create a safe space and to create coherence. Because like in any conversation, but even more so, to create a coherence where our dialogical space does not fragment, creates the foundation to move somewhere in this conversation, whatever the conversation is about. But I would like to go to the other side of it, because if there's just safety and coherence, it can be very powerful, it can be very peaceful, particularly when you want to meditate together, you just enjoy this space. But the dialogue has something different. It has also a movement into the unknown. So there's a daring factor. And part of what creates this daring factor is the courage to also allow creative friction to be alive between us. That the different perspectives that we hold are not kind of shut out or are not held in a form of confrontation, but that exactly this point where friction could change to conflict is the sweet spot where something can happen between us that is very powerful and creative. So to hold this coherence, to really hold a care for the space where we don't fragment, but also to have the courage to allow our friction to be part of this space, so that in going into the sweet spot, something can show up where you say something, Ursula, and I don't understand what you're saying, or it doesn't make sense to me, or whatever, and I say something and it doesn't make sense, and we allow this to be part of the conversation without fragmenting. And interesting enough, exactly this point where we don't understand each other, but still stay curious, interested, caring, is the very same spot where creative insight happens very often. Because in my leaning into my not understanding you, but listening to you and being curious, and you staying with me and not understanding what I'm saying, but being curious and caring, there is the potential that something shows up that we both have not thought of, but it's a higher synthesis, a higher synergy between the different perspectives that we are holding. So part of the power of a creative conversation is to hold this coherence, to hold the safe space, but to dare to also allow friction to be part of it, so that we can move to places that is beyond where we have been already. Mm. And to hold this together is part of the dance. Mm. Because if you go too far, there's a danger of fragmentation and conflict and whatever. We all know that. If you don't dare, it also can become nice, boring, lack of life, and the life is in holding both parts at the same time.
Well, tension is aliveness, and there's an in aliveness there is a tension, and tension is not a bad thing. Tension is what gives life. It's having the rope be tight. It's a positive tension, and that creating coherence and evoking the wholeness that we are in, the non-separation that is the ground, that is the first step, and the holding space for this diversity of opinions, that to actually come into tension, to create heat, to create fire, to create something potentially new, rather than when we work from when we're only aware of the different perspectives, we end up being fragmented. If we're only aware of my perspective and your perspective and someone else's perspective are here, and we're not holding this space, we end up in fragmentation, which is what we all recognize at a deep level doesn't feel safe. So thank you.
Thank you. Anna, the next one. We see you, Narita, and we'll get there.
Dana?
Yes. I'm just struck by the sense of awe that is felt in the deep listening space. Mm-hmm. And I have in the past thought of awe as being something that's most accessible when I'm in the presence of a big predator or a big vista, mm-hmm. or, grand something. And I'm just struck by the opportunity for it to be here all the time. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate your articulation of the tension and aliveness. and that they are necessary constituents. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Brandon?
Yeah, it was such a sweet session, that conversation. A couple of things. One thing that Sophie, when she was speaking, brought back was when she was speaking about the formation of the space in the ear in our infancy. Listening is something that descends upon us. It's not something we necessarily get to choose that happens. It's something that develops as we develop it. We receive it as a gift almost. And so it's that alone is something that's quite fascinating to me, you know. And in our group, we were talking about what are the steps, or what is required for deep or deeper listening to occur. And the first thing that was mentioned was intention, and then curiosity came forward, and then surrender came forward. And so just wanted to share that these were a few of the things that we uncovered as somewhat necessary for a deeper listening to occur. So I'll leave it there for now.
No,
thank you.
No, really thank you, Brandon, because you allow us to speak something that is, in fact, in the very core of our understanding of this dialogical work. It's part of the reason why we call it emergent dialogues. That the listening is listening to something that I don't have already in my consciousness and awareness. It shows up. If I'm not listening, if I'm not willing to use your words to receive, which means I have to be open or open-handed, there's nothing that can emerge between us. But the power of listening and the power of the sweet spot where friction and coherence and not knowing become one is that something shows up that is beyond us or before us, however you want to call it. And to be there for this is exactly the sweet spot where the new era arrives between us, and nobody brought it. At least we did not bring it. We were just here to receive it.
And that was the intimacy.
Yes.
That is such an intimate space to be in, where I don't know and you don't know, and we're going to be in that experience together.
Yes,
absolutely. Yeah. And actually, it's that being willing to stay in that open, vulnerable place of not knowing, and being together, and responding with one's intuition of like, okay, something's coming to me now. It's this. It's not that it arrives through us, but not, and through all of the knowledge and all of the life experience that we each have, it plays that like an instrument, and we give to that, and that's the surrender you were speaking of. But and then you see that it begins to form itself, and it's out of that deep intention and willingness to let go, which is surrender, that something can come to mind, into ourselves that we hadn't really thought before.
And excuse me if I use some emphatic language here, but it's just how it really occurs to me. It seems like a collective birthing, where we are, and that's what makes it birthing. We are willing together to receive something that we only can receive together. It's our togetherness that allows this to be birthed. I cannot, you cannot, but in holding this place together, something can be brought to life that comes exactly out of us meeting in this. And it's a very tender place, and it needs a lot of care, and it needs a lot of surrender to go there.
Yay.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you very much for holding this space. I wanted to share that as I was holding the space and I was willing to go into that mystery and all these wonderful words, I experienced a deep sense of belonging. I never experienced before with a group of people that I didn't, out of my family and intimate friends, I didn't experience before such a deep sense of belonging. And also even with some people, I experienced them as if they were my family. Like I found them beautiful, and I was so happy. And I thank you for that experience. This was wonderful. I've been working with groups for a very long time, all my life, but and I knew at the thought level that I belong.
Right.
World,
Right.
the whole, I mean, there's something bigger than, but not at this. I today I did sense it.
That's beautiful to hear. That's really wonderful to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's this space that opens up is home.
It's home.
It's home, and this space of where there is human presence and a recognition that that presence is not just isolated in me or in you, but is actually between us. There's a relaxation and a falling into a deeper sense of being here that is home. And then we do that together and we find out that we're brothers and sisters. but it's why in so many spiritual experiences they talk about coming home or the journey back home, and this is at one level of home. And I deeply appreciate what you brought to us.
Thank you so much, Narita. Dana.
No, Dana already went.
Oh, yes.
Kechal.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you for
Good to see
holding this.
you.
Same here, good to see you. Thank you for holding this space for all of us also. I wanted to share two things. One is I heard for the first time that there's an option to kind of hide myself on the screen. And I tried that yesterday. I was kind of unconscious, and in between I would just switch it on to make sure, okay, I'm looking fine and it's not very, like I was still like thinking about it back of my mind. But today I'm more settled with it and I know it's okay, the camera is on, but I'm not visible. And I'm able to connect to the people present here. And also 80 people was a lot of people for me. And I was like scrolling through the screen one at a time to make sure I'm able to kind of be present to the different people on the screens rather than thinking about how do I look. So that was really powerful for me. And second thing I wanted to share about our group, it was very interesting that at a certain point in our, while we were discussing, some of us didn't have enough bandwidth, so we kind of put our video off. And after noticing that, somebody from the group suggested that, hey, why don't we just all of us put our videos off so that just out of care for the person, so that one person doesn't feel that they are not on the video and other is on the video. And said, let's just experiment. How does that feel for us in the group? And that kind of really shifted things, because suddenly we saw that there are like 4 or 5 blocks with just names of people, and like for the beginning it brought a sense of distance and detachment. And you also shared how it's a little distractive because we are randomly looking at objects around maybe first and we're not able to be present to the conversation. But as we kind of tried to kind of listen more deeply, we were able to relate and connect a lot more to the voice and the tone of the person. And that was helping us connect a lot more to what emotions and where the person was sharing from. And that really opened up a very different sort of intimacy with a voice and the recognition of a voice which doesn't have a visual. And I don't see what the person is, who the person is. So we were also discussing how somebody at in the earlier conversation mentioned that they were counseling people over phone for a lot of number of years and how that transformed them. So we were able to relate to that experience while doing this and understand how each space can be intimate in their own way, with video, without video also, and each has a different dynamic that comes out.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you very much. That's absolutely true. And I think we mentioned, I think on the website, and maybe we said this yesterday, that when we started doing this work, we did it by telephone without any camera. And the degree of intimacy and part of it is that how carefully you have to listen when you're on, you know, on a phone together. We would have telephone calls with 40 people, and while at the beginning it would be kind of bumpy,
no one could raise their hands.
yeah, you couldn't see anybody, you couldn't, but over time, after 15, 20 minutes, a half an hour, a coherence would create and people would respond. You know, it'd be one conversation with people responding in the moment without overlapping each other. So there's a kind of deep listening and that can happen without the picture. But to bring that then into the picture, then it's like, then what can happen? That's what we're exploring now.
In fact, sometimes I'm tempted with the thought to experiment, to do some training hours without the video, because I still remember the times when we did this all on conference calls. And of course, there's a lot of disadvantages with that. Also, the voice, it was much more difficult to hear and all that. But there was something which I would call, it felt like a pure meeting in consciousness. Because there was nothing. There was no face to relate to, no, you look at me, do you look somewhere else, do you smile? There was just the tone of the voice and the meaning of the voice. And we had also what I said about the music, the dialogue. You had to listen and make it a whole just out of the listening. There's something very powerful about that. And it was a big learning experience for us also to learn this without images, because you have to really listen to language, to tone, to pitch, and something is transmitted that usually you're not aware of. There's so much in the voice when we are talking.
Great, thank you, Kejal. Thank you very much. Now, S. Kinsey. I don't know. S.
Yeah,
Kinsey.
it's that's me. I'm Sheila.
Hi, Sheila.
Okay. I was also in the group with Sophia and Narita, so I can add another part about the openness for transformation and the listening to help us, you know, to change or to be open to any kind of change in the sharing and in the listening with one another. I work in justice and peace, and so the creating of the space for safety for various positions, how to create that, how to have is important for the things that I need to do. When you talked about yesterday, the ability to step back and to be intimate without moving, you know, we experience the body symbol of moving in as a we and then moving back as an I. So to continue to keep that safe pace and have it, you know, in facilitation, how do you keep that kind of dynamic within yourself so that you can really enable an openness within the group?
So if I understand your question, you're asking, how do you keep the dynamic, the dynamic between
the group, to help the groups remain open by the presence of the facilitator?
I think it's probably the sum of what we've been speaking about. One is one's own. The facilitator is always the one that's tested, right? That it's one's own openness, one's own capacity and interest and love for the whole, the presence of the whole space that is essential, and developing really holding that or it's not holding it out, but embodying and stretching to encompass the wholeness that one is intuiting, and to stay tuned into the wholeness of it. And this may sound like mysterious words, but being attentive to the wholeness that we create between each other, within ourselves, that it's one thing that we're really observing and engaging with and coming out of.
And your question allows me also to talk about something that I, in fact, see as maybe one of the main secrets of this work and how we work. And it's a very simple thing. It's resonance. And the capacity to resonate and to perceive resonance. So when you as a facilitator have a resonance with the wholeness, and you see someone else resonating with his wholeness, resonance can strengthen resonance. And when you see someone having difficulty with the resonance, you can invite the resonance. One experience of myself in this work, and it again and again happens, less so now than it used to be, if there's no resonance to it, I feel completely helpless. There's nothing to work with. If there's no resonance in the room to hold this wholeness, you can't enforce it, you only can invite to it. But as soon as there's a tiny bit of resonance and you are sensitive enough to be aware of it, you can resonate with the resonance. And then the way resonance works, it builds on each other. So it may sound like a little mysterious wording, but it is in fact a very direct guiding line where you have an inner compass of the resonance to the wholeness, the resonance to the coherence, the resonance also to the multiplicity that we are in, and how to bring that in a complex resonating body that is beyond or before my mind and my cognitive capacity to do so. And that allows me, and allows us to build something that is a resonating conversation.
Mm. And resonance is also the foundation of music. It's the foundation of harmony, of dissonance. It's the vibration of it's the energy of life. It's the vibration of being together. And it's resonance is core to this because it is energy, language, and all that we've been speaking about, rhythm, movement. And I think
we are also at the end of our 3 hours here. And just thank you very much for making the time for this. There's one thing I would like to bring in. We do this course for free, and we do it really because we believe in that. We also appreciate if you feel so. If you want to give a donation for this, it definitely helps us to do our work. If you feel inclined to, but it's as you feel and
are able
to. It is meant to be free. There's no pressure on anything. But if you feel motivated we appreciate it very much because this is what makes our work possible. And yeah, we will build on this tomorrow and in the next day. And I'm really happy how this conversation is unfolding.
And actually, I want to, pardon?
How many days are we going to, are we finished today or 4 days?
No, it's 4 days. We have 2 more days.
If you have time for it, we are halfway in.
We've just done the consciousness part, and next we're going to talk about design. How do we design these spaces? But we're going to try to do it. The reason why we did the consciousness part first is we want to do the design part from the consciousness, and not because in order to hold this in order that the most important part is the center of how we work. I also would like you. We're going to leave you with the breakout rooms again, so that if you want to go back and talk to the people who you were speaking with in your last group, you can do that. If you don't want to, you can just stay here in the main room. And in the main room, you will there'll probably be a couple of people who will show up, and you can hang out with them. And I wanted to mention, if you don't mind, in an hour there's Radio Evolve, which Thomas does every week.
So if you have not spent enough time on screen right now, she has an offering for you.
It's actually oral.
It's
partly oral. Thomas has a beautiful dialogue, very interesting dialogue with Jason Hill at 8 o'clock on Radio Evolve. You can find it on Facebook. And Jason Hill is talking about the crisis in sense making, the crisis in making sense out of life that he feels is at the bottom of what we're all facing. So I think that it's a very interesting conversation. And afterwards, if you want to practice dialogue, there's an open dialogue forum. Oh, I'm sorry, Jason Hall. I blew that. So check it out on Facebook if you're interested, and join that for some practice dialogue. But thank you so much.
It's 1 hour from now.
It's 1 hour from now. Yes, I'm sorry. 1 hour from now.
And afterwards, it's an open forum where we talk about the conversation that we had. So if you don't have enough, you can have more.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Otherwise, you can leave now. If we bring you in the group, you can chat there a little bit, and you can chat as much as you want. The room stays open here. Thank you very much, and see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.